It is Saturday, and that means another Spirit Talk. Today, I'm going to continue talking about how to hear God and the different ways that He speaks to us, the different nuances that we need to keep our eyes open for. Welcome to Spirit Talk by Free Legions, a platform for those who love God and seek fellowship without crippling judgment, without the human control systems, and without the religious ways of the world. So come join us as we dig into spiritual issues that are related to our everyday life. So it is time for another round, thinking about how to hear God and how we can, become better at that, how we can come closer to Him and eliminate more of the clutter and the noise that is not from Him. And I've been talking about this earlier, and I've gone through the list of, we have to be desperate, we have to be willing, we have to really want to hear truth, and we have to be available. If we, choose that this is not on the menu, or I don't want to hear this because that can't be from God, we've already limited Him so much, and that is a shame. We shouldn't do that. But it is human to do so. We have our own understanding of things, and that's how it goes, but still it is our task to try to work against that. And then last time I talked about, the concept of surprise, because God seems to like to speak to us in surprising ways. And if we look in the Bible, there are so many creative elements in there. There's hardly ever are things done the same way over and over and over again. God is creative. He is following certain principles, and you can see, resemblance between the different instances, but still, there's always a catch. There's always a new way, a new aspect, something that catch people off guard in some kind of way. Like, oh, I didn't expect that. And so it is so common for us to look at how God has spoken to us or to others before, and kind of use that as a standard, like a format of how it's going to happen next time. And that is what surprises is about, because He usually doesn't do it that way. God usually likes to stretch our understanding, come from a totally different angle, so that we cannot lean on our routines and our worldly rational mind of God usually comes in this door and He's dressed in red and He carries this yellow thing. Not that He's doing that, but we like to categorize it. We like to be in full control and know in advance how it's going to be. Well, guess what? That's going to fail big time. It's not going to work that way. I have had so incredibly many dreams that I have written down and worked during the day and perhaps for weeks afterwards, really trying to understand, what did you say in this dream? Did you say anything at all? And if you did, what was it really? And as I've done that, I've had so many, just small experiences, big as well, but these experiences where you see something is being told or explained to you in a dream in symbolic ways. And then when I manage to understand what it means, because symbols are not obvious, and then later on I get to see it happen in life. And that is the best teacher, basically, because if I interpreted it, the right way, then life will show me that it was correct. If it was the wrong way, then life is going to show me that it wasn't, that way. But the thing is that even though so many of these dreams turned up to be like, yeah, you saw it, you got it. But in the middle of that, there's always a surprise. It's like, yeah, you got it, you understood it, but it came from this angle. You didn't see that coming, did you? And so that is the kind of surprises that God seems to, play around with. Sometimes I'm thinking he's messing around a little bit with us just to make sure that we don't get settled in, old, stiff patterns. Because he is a creative God, and he has so many ways and so many resources. And the more we get to understand how he is expressing himself and communicating with us, the more fascinating it becomes to walk with him and to try to understand the depth of even simple things in our lives. And so the way that he speaks or the meaning of the things that is communicated, the layers in them, that is something that is related to surprise. But then there's also surprise in timing, because it seems to be a pattern, not that it has to be like that, but it's so common that people get, these gorgeous messages, important bits from God in the most inconvenient times. Like you've been waiting for them for a long time, and then you get them while you're out walking and you have nothing to write on, and perhaps you're just far away from home. Or like a friend of mine and myself as well, how many times have we said that, I was in the shower and boom, there it was. A friend of mine, she just recently got a poem. She's that kind of person that gets these love letters from God, as I call them, because it's like lullabies from the loving dad. And sometimes they can be a little bit, like stiffening us up and, a little bit of salt and that kind of thing as well. But the tone, it is so wonderful. It's the kind of lullabies I would love to have as a child. And she gets these. It just, that's her way of getting information from God, and not that she's saying that these are God's words, but it's inspired, just like I can see images and I draw it and I make it and there it is. So she gets poems, and it comes with surprise as well, because she's one of those that told me recently that I got this poem. And it wasn't so long, but I just had to catch it. And I was in the shower, I had shampoo in my hair, and I just had to, running half naked around the house to find pen and paper, and she was wet, and, just to scribble down those words. And then it was for a certain person. She knew that it was for a certain person. And so she sent them off on a text message, and that person was just about to walk into a court case, and the words that was given through a poem, a short poem, spoke directly into the situation, and it just was so obvious that God was in it. Nevertheless, the point is not that, but the point is the timing. God could have made my friend just go in the shower a little bit earlier, so that it would have been a little bit easier, a little bit more comfortable and suitable. But that wasn't the case. It seems that quite often God is testing us with these little things, because does it matter that much to you that you will go out of your way with shampoo in your hair, you're wet, it's cold outside your shower, it's just not the right time, you know? It is inconvenient. But still, will you go out of your way to take that little note, to take that little message and write it down? And that is a part of his testing. If we say no to those kind of things, I do believe that we will get less messages. He's not going to be that eager to send new information if we fail to take it when it comes the way it comes. So that is one of the reasons why I believe a lot of these inputs comes at the most ridiculous times. But another thing is that our brains are, they are made up of two brain sides or parts. You have the left and you have the right, and they operate very differently. And the right is the creative brain. It is the brain part, or the part of our brain that is more suited for revelation, because it works in symbols and it is beyond time and the rational, and it is the place to receive from the spiritual. But we also need the left side of the brain, because that is where we can put it into words and meaning, and in a way that we can communicate it in a way that the rational mind can understand it, which is so important if we're going to share it with others. And so, our right brain is absolutely a place where we have less boundaries and we are closer to the heavenly realms. And that may be the reason why so many creative people are more into the prophetic, or to say it the other way, so many prophetic people are incredibly creative, because it is a part of that same function to be able to grasp something invisible and pull it into either shape or sound or words or whatever it is. But it is that exchange of the subtle into the physical, visible, tangible. And so one of the reasons why this timing surprise seems to be a thing is because at the strange times that we seem to get these kind of inputs from God, those are the times when we are usually in a state of our mind, like a trance-like state, that I suppose is activating the right side of the brain. And so if you think of it, driving a car, walking a familiar path, having a shower, baking, or doing anything that is kind of like physical and practical, but very routine-based and monotonous, in such a way that you just get into a state where you don't really think about anything, and you may not even remember afterwards where you've been driving, what happened. You just are. You're just there. And time passes as if time doesn't exist. And that is a right brain signature. And for that reason, I do believe that we getting into that state, we getting into these activities that put our brains into that state, is like opening the doors to what God has to share. And perhaps there are packages there, messages that He's been working on or preparing for us for, hours or days or weeks or who knows. And then when we get in that state and it is time for us to get that message, then boom, there it is. So that is part of why these surprising moments happen the way that they do. Now, we can use that to our advantage. in discerning whether or not things are from God, because it is not so common that when we ask God directly, like, here now, I need answer for this, or whatever it is, we can get an instant answer. But it is also very common that we don't get it right away. But we send it out. It's like mail, you write the letter and you send it off. And if you are kind of like me, you want the reply kind of like before you've sent it, right? That's called impatience. But at the same time, that is a driving force. So we send it out, and then there's a process, and an answer is gonna come back. And part of knowing that it is from God is when it is coming, that answer is coming when you least expected it. You'd forgotten about the question, probably. You can't remember that you sent off a letter. And you just moved on and you focus on other things. And, let's say you're in the middle of making dinner because you're going to have 4 kids and 2 guests. And, you're having your hands full with other stuff. And perhaps your brain is really full of other stuff as well. But then you tap into this activity, like just stirring the sauce or cutting the potatoes or whatever it is that you are doing. And it's kind of like this state where you're just doing it and you don't pay attention to anything else in there. Boom. That question that you asked, that topic that you brought up, maybe days or weeks or years earlier, there it is, another piece in the puzzle. Perhaps you don't get the entire answer, perhaps you do. Or perhaps you just get one more bit, like, oh, now I got 5 out of 10 bits. It's starting to look like something, huh? But nevertheless, whether you get all or a little, the kind of way that it comes, like when you don't expect it, that is something that is so typical of God. So, surprises, that is indeed an important thing when it comes to determining whether or not it is from God. Now, I do believe it would be a good thing to teach you what surprise is in Norway, or in Norwegian to be correct. And yeah, I'm gonna go with that and do exactly so. It is time for the Norwegian word of the day. Yippee! So, surprise, that is the word of the day. And how do we pronounce that or say that in Norwegian? Well, you say surprise, we say overraskelse. I said it a little bit, I exaggerated a little bit, so overraskelse is what we say. But it's made up out of a few segments. It's kind of like, well, it's not separate words in this case. It's more like, like elements that can stand alone, like sir or pre. And so we got over, which is the same as over. And it means the same. Over, over. And after that we have rask, which means fast. But it doesn't really, I do believe it has to do with fast. But, the end that comes after it makes it into something slightly different. And the end is kind of like ish. It's not a separate word that you can use. But after that, you have over, then you have rask, and then you have else. So it ends up being overraskelse. And if I was to translate it directly to English, it would be kind of like, well, over fastish. So if something happens very over fastish, well, then you're gonna be surprised, aren't you? I'm going to talk about a different pattern or a different phenomena in how God is speaking to us. And that is a way that is, it is subtle, but at the same time, it is very clear. And it may be a way that you don't expect. I mean, if you have experienced it, you will recognize it and go like, oh, yeah, I've seen that. And perhaps you've had it but never noticed, because it's just, well, it is embroidered into our lives in a way that is so natural that you can walk through the entire life without noticing, but at the same time, it is so clear. So, what am I talking about? I'm talking about mirroring and, like reflective images and synchronicity. There's a lot of ways to have synchronicity. You can have, like 2 events happening after each other or at the same time in such a way that you just know that, okay, God is in this. And that is good, but right now I'm going to talk about something that is a little bit deeper than that, because it goes beyond just, for example, I saw a spade today, and then my neighbor, he came with a spade, and then I couldn't find my own spade because my daughter called me and she wanted my spade. I mean, like, these kind of things when something suddenly pops up and that is the topic, and it's like, whoa, what is all this stuff with spades? But even deeper than that is when you have a situation, perhaps with a person, and or it could be a job, or it could be anything basically, but you have something that you are really, really working on, and you are calling out to God to help you in that situation. Let's just use an example. Let's say that I have a person that is lying to me and telling me stuff that is just not true, and it causes problems, and I'm trying to fix that. I'm trying to resort that with that person. Now, I may be working on that, and my focus is, all the lying and all the consequences and that kind of thing. But what I've noticed is that in these kind of situations, God can sneak in, a person in my life that starts to see me as a liar. Not necessarily because I am a liar at all, but simply so that I get to experience the other side of the situation. Perhaps I've said something that wasn't accurate. I didn't mean to say something that was inaccurate, but the other person perceived it as if I was lying, although I didn't. And then I'm on the other side of the table. Suddenly somebody thinks that I am lying and is telling me, please stop that because it has these kind of consequences. And the more you get to see these kind of elements working parallelly, it is so deep, and it is so mind-wobbling, because it's not the same. Well, but this other person is lying. I'm not. I just made a mistake. And then you start thinking, well, what if the other person just made a mistake, and yeah, it is deep. But the thing is that God does this kind of stuff. He sees the things that we are struggling with, and it's not by coincidence. And then he puts people and situation in our lives so that we can play the other role, or see the other side of the situation, or to mirror it in a different setting, so that subconsciously you're going to soak in, you're going to take in all of this and let it become a part of the soup that you are eating at the moment, to say it that way. And bit by bit, you're gonna get it, But until you get it, it is in that subconscious realm of a little bit here and a little bit there and some input from God here, and I don't understand it because it's not obvious. That is the typical thing. We get these kind of signs and mirroring things, but we don't really get it. But then with time and with love for God and with just following the process, whether it takes months or years, we will get it. It's kind of like it shapes us, it changes us, and it's going beneath and beyond our conscious mind. So these are among the things that God is doing to talk to us. So if something is popping up very, often, where you see things being repeated, like patterns, like, okay, but this person is treating me like that, and I am treating this other person quite similarly, actually. And then, or just like objects, as I said, like a spade, which is a silly, example, but still, it is these ridiculous examples that sometimes is the case. When it is a little bit ridiculous, we are the ones that can start understanding that, yes, this was not just a coincidence. This was somebody trying to take, to give me a hint, to tell me something. And that is definitely something that we should value and cherish a lot. Now I'm going to go back and talk a little bit more about surprises, because the things that I just talked about now, about mirroring and reflecting and synchronicity, is also about surprises, because basically we don't expect, dolphins to pop up all day long. And that is why synchronicities can speak to us. It is because it's not expected for something to pop up that often. That's when we recognize that, oh yeah, this is a message. But then surprise in the message, why is that important? Well, it is important because all of the things that I've told you until now, this is kind of like, God is surprising. But another point is that if we are not surprised by the content of the message, then we need to question, was it really from God? So I've talked about, the ways that he's doing things that is surprising, and I've talked about the timing being surprising, but now also the content is surprising. And I'll use an example that is very practical so that you get what I'm saying. Because when God speaks, it is not always obvious and clear so that you understand everything at once with your rational mind. On some kind of level, you probably understand. On some kind of level, you probably have a great understanding, but then with your rational mind, it's kind of like, what? And so, when our soul speaks, or our flesh, we understand right away. I want chocolate. That is not very surprising, right? I want to marry this guy. That is not surprising. So these kind of fairy tales, like daydream sort of messages, is very, very typical of the soul and of familiar spirits that are influencing the soul or the flesh. So then, to have these kind of messages that is so obvious, that is a danger sign, because basically it is when we have the more complex ones that we don't understand right away, that takes time to interpret, that we have a guarantee or a greater guarantee that we didn't make it up on our own. Because as I've said earlier, we don't make up things we don't understand. If I'm going to make up something like wishful thinking, it's going to be something that I want and understand, like chocolate. but I'm not going to make up, words in a different language that I don't know, or symbols that I can't interpret, or that I will spend months to understand. So that surprise in the content it's not necessary for it to be from God, but it is so valuable when you get it, because then I didn't make up this one. And now I'm going to give you an example from my life that happened recently, and that was I had this dialogue with God, and I was shown a belt, like a thick metal, like military belt, like the one that you would have next to a shield and helmet and all of that, And so I did understand that, okay, it's related to truth, because you have the belt of truth, and it's related to, going out in the world and doing something in this world. But on the belt, it had 12 points, as if fire hoses could be attached to it. And I understood that those fire hoses would be the carriers of living water that would run through these points or holes in the belt, as if God was going to fill me up and he was going to be running out from my belly with rivers of living water. Have you heard of that before? And so I knew kind of like what it was related to. And it was beautiful and it was biblical, but at the same time I was wondering, but in what kind of way is this going to happen? In practical terms, what does it mean? I had no idea. And so, like belt, rivers, water, nurturing. I mean, there's so many, but how? Am I going to be talking? Am I going to be doing something? Am I going to be writing? I mean, like, how do I get living water to run out in 12 different directions? What does it look like? Well, I didn't know. But at the same time, I had started to design products. And I didn't think about that. That was just, like a t-shirt, and I was designing the print to go in front and things like that. But then it developed and it started to be more products, and the creativity just flowed, and it started to look like something I had worked with, or that God had inspired me for years and years and years earlier. And suddenly I was doing, the beginning of what I've seen with the belt. Because I had this concept in my mind for like a decade or two, with 12 different aspects of the force of God, the life force, being translated into designs, into products with colors and shapes and words and everything in such a way that it was carrying that vibration and influencing the people that was wearing these clothes or having it in their house, that it would be kind of like a therapeutic object that would help people to get closer to that aspect of God. And well, I can understand, I mean, it's a little bit of a strange concept, but these are the kind of concepts that I've been working for a decade or more. And now I was suddenly starting to do that. And as I was doing it without understanding, I didn't plan it, it just started to happen. Because I got inspired, and that's how it started to form itself. And that's when I remembered, the belt and 12 hoses or points for the hoses for it to flow. And that's when I understood that that's what you told me with that image, that I was gonna I was going to start doing this that you called me for so long ago. And you just couldn't imagine or guess that, this belt and these fire hoses was gonna represent producing products or designing. But when it happens, it is a confirmation. It's like, now I get it. So these bits that we get from God are like puzzle pieces. And every time we get a piece that fits, it is like, there it is. And it's a surprise because you didn't expect it to come that way. So now I'm gonna pray a little bit, because it is so important that we are on the alert and receptive to these messages, to these surprises, that we don't disregard them. And so I just say thank you, Father, for making us even more tuned with you, so that we understand and see the difference and see you in these little things, in these small signs that you put into our lives, and make them so common and so ordinary that we may actually miss them. But help us, God, to see them and notice them. Give us the wisdom to chew upon them and seek them out. And give us that understanding that we need to connect. Because connecting with you is of the essence, but also connecting the dots in our own brains, between the different things that happens in our lives, and to see the connections between what happened 10 years ago and now, or what happened in this department of the brain and this other. So I thank you, Father, that you open us up to a new understanding in you, that we will rejoice in your surprising and creative ways, and that we may turn into kings that find joy in seeking out the mysteries that you hold. So in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, may it all be done exactly the way that you want it. May we all walk close to you and be blessed by the glory that you carry, your presence, your wisdom, and all that you have to offer. So that's what I had for today, and I will be back next Saturday. Well, I will probably play a replay, to be honest, because next Saturday is going to be the day before Christmas Eve here in Norway, and I'm not really celebrating Christmas, but then again, I'm not going to be at home because I have family, and I'm going to visit and, be a good family member. So I'm not going to be back next Saturday, but there will be a replay. And then later on, I will be back when it's time to get back, and I will continue to talk about how to hear God. There's plenty of aspects. And next time, I do believe I will go into, the brain. The right brain, the left brain, and how we can train our system to get better at, getting into the right brain and activating that part, because it is so important if we want to hear more from God and if we want to understand more of life and ourselves in general. So that's what's coming up, and it's going to be on Saturday. Well, I don't know the date right now, but it's going to be on a Saturday, which is like 10 a.m. US Pacific time, which means 19 o'clock in Europe, and in Florida it will be like 1 p.m. And now I'm going to go on to have a private prayer gathering. And if you hear this and you're thinking, I would like to be a part of that, well, then you can, because it is not closed. It is open, but it's just not broadcasted. So if you want to do that, you can come to freelegions.com and send me a message. Or you can go to Facebook at Free Legions and send me a message there. And then we'll sort out the technical details, and you're welcome to come and join us. But then until next time, I hope you will have a wonderful holiday. I hope that you will feel God's presence more than before. And I hope you will realize and know that He really loves you.